So today I've got the top 10 cards redo. So in March, I ranked the top 10 cards in Spark of Rebellion. And what I'm going to do now is take a look at my previous ranks and then redo them. I got a couple more months of information, actually almost 3 months of new information. Got a bunch of things wrong, probably a few things right. I'm going to take a look, going to redo it based on what I think are currently the best cards in the first set. So this is the previous list. That video came out on March 23rd. It had 6 honorable mentions up top there, and then from 10 to 1, these were the cards. We're going to see which ones stayed in the top 10, which ones got pushed out, and which ones, came in hot and took over some spots from other cards. Now, before we get going, if you don't mind, please take a second, just subscribe to the channel. It helps out a ton. I'd really appreciate it. All right, so here we go. First up, honorable mentions. So we got these 6 cards. I got on the bottom there their previous ranks. So we got Force Throw. It used to be ranked 7. I knocked it down to honorable mentions, mostly because I don't think its meta presence is quite there. It is still a tremendously powerful card. It's just the shells around it might not be quite tier 1. Sorry, Churret. I love the deck. I think it's very powerful, but I don't think it's quite on the level of some of the other decks, and that's really the only shell where Force Throw is quite dominant. A new honorable mention, Surprise Strike. Premier card right now. I think it's like kind of a really important piece of any Boba Fett deck and the Yellow Sabine deck. It's one of the main reasons people would even choose to play Yellow Sabine instead of Green Sabine, I think. It's just a really powerful card. Could argue even that it should be in the top 10. I was this close to putting it there, but I left it in honorable mentions. For a Cause I Believe In, I bumped it out of the top 10. I just don't think it is the most important piece of these Sabine aggro decks anymore. It's clearly very powerful, but there are some matchups where I think the card is actually kind of a dud, like in Mirrors or against Boba Yellow. Sabine is really never able to play this card. It's like not really doing much in like the aggro Mirrors. It's still very important. Look, it's an honorable mention. It's in the 16 best cards, I think. It's just not in the top 10 anymore. Boba Fett, it went from 9 into honorable mention. Clearly, it's like one of the best 3-drop units on rate in the game. I think there's maybe one that's a little better than it, and we'll talk about it a little later. Bodhi Rook, I put it into the top 16. It's in honorable mention here. I think basically the card props up Boba Yellow in such a way that makes it competitive into control decks, in my opinion. I think without this card, those decks would be much weaker. It even sees some splash play in like Boba Green or in U-Wing decks where it can come in off of U-Wing as a 3 cost. The discard effect is just really powerful. I think discard in general is a pretty strong mechanic right now. And Bodhi Rook is premium in specifically the mono yellow deck. And lastly, Luke Skywalker, similarly to Force Throw. I think the shells around it just aren't quite tier 1. I think the card itself on rate is incredibly powerful, maybe the best 7-drop unit on rate, but the shells aren't quite on tier 1 right now, and as such, I had to knock it out of my top 10. All right, let's get to the actual top 10. Number 10, K2SO. Previous rank was honorable mention, so, it clawed its way up there. I think this is kind of the linchpin of these Sabine decks. I think this is, especially in the green version that has Energy Conversion Lab, one of the most dangerous cards they can be playing. It provides reach and board and like board presence at the same time. It's crazy with Heroic Sacrifice. It's crazy with Sneak Attack. It's crazy with Energy Conversion Lab. It has some utility outside of Sabine decks, like in Churret, where you play a bunch of discard effects together, like this Force Throw and Force Surrender, and really punish control decks. So it has wide enough application. I don't think it's as narrow as just like this is only an aggro card. And as such, I pushed it up into the top 10, and it's just a great card to be running. All right, number 9, Energy Conversion Lab. Previous rank, number 1. So this is a pretty heavy drop. Now it's still in the top 10. I still think this is easily the best base. And it's still kind of a centerpiece of a few very powerful decks. Boba Green, Sabine Green, and like the blue-green villain control decks like Iden and Krennic. I think Energy Conversion Lab is core in all of these decks. It does some really crazy stuff, specifically in Sabine with K2 and Steadfast Battalion. Giving Sabine a way to actually cheat actions and maintain board presence is incredibly powerful. Same with Boba Green and like these Krennic decks that they use it with Steadfast Battalion or with things like Consortium Star Viper to help against aggro decks. The reason it's no longer number 1 is because, you know, there are some green decks that are opting not to run this base. So I feel like since it's no longer like an auto slam include, maybe it doesn't deserve the number 1 spot. These are decks such as Han Green and Vader Green and Luke Green. Now, personally, I don't think any of those decks are on the power level of the Boba decks or like the Sabine decks, but or like even the blue-green villain control decks, but they are meta players and they can win tournaments. And if they're not playing Energy Conversion Lab, maybe Energy Conversion Lab can no longer sit alone on the throne. All right, number 8, 7th Fleet Defender. Previous rank, it did not have one. So this kind of replaced Boba Fett here. And the reason I think this card right now is better than Boba Fett is because it's just way too obnoxious to deal with for so many decks. This card alone makes me need to play Make an Opening in decks, and I don't want to play Make an Opening. I don't think that card is any good, but it kind of is good because it defeats this thing cleanly. The shield is just incredibly annoying. Space presence in a very ground-dominant meta is just super important. Although Boba Fett and 7th Fleet Defender, they basically are played in all the same decks. Boba Fett is just easier to deal with a lot of the time because ground is more gummed up. They hit for the same amount of damage when you're going face. And 7th Fleet Defender, just that shield, making it immune to damage removal, like open fire and overwhelming barrage, is just really annoying. On rate, I think Boba Fett is likely like the better card as terms of like value, but in this current metagame, when my opponent plays 7th Fleet Defender, I am angrier than when they play Boba Fett unit. So that's why this card came into the top 10 and Boba Fett left it. Number 7, Super Laser Blast, previous rank. Again, it was unranked. The reason this is up here is because I think it's single-handedly propping up an entire archetype, which is these hard control decks like Mono Blue Iden, Blue Red Vader, and Blue Boba. The decks that are built to stall out until they hit a Super Laser Blast, reset the board, and then either take off from there with Mill and like Vigilance, or just take off by finishing you with like Vader unit into Avenger, or just, you know, Avenger in general, or Avenger and Fire Spray if you're playing with Boba. I mean, the decks can beat you with damage, and they can beat you with Mill, but their entire game plan falls apart if they don't have this card, and that's why it's up here. All right, next up, Overwhelming Barrage, number 6, previous rank 4. Now, this is going to be a chain of green villain cards, green villain staples. We're starting with Overwhelming Barrage. Knocked it down a little bit because I think basically it's incredibly important, but it's no longer like a de facto slam win. I think a lot of decks now can kind of get around really absurd barrage blowouts. There's shielded units like we talked about with 7th Fleet Defender, which is incredibly annoying. There's these hard control decks, which absolutely do not care if you're running this card. And because of this, you know, I knocked it down a little bit. It's still amazing. It still cleans up. It's still like a huge reason blue-green villain control can do what it does. Just maybe a tiny bit weaker than some of the other stuff. Number 5, Darth Vader. So this guy actually stayed in the exact same spot. It's the only card that did not move in rank. You know, premium 7 drop, premium gap closer / finisher for blue-green villain, or top end for a green Boba. It's just a really important card. It provides a lot of value. It taxes control decks removal. It can kind of close games against aggro. It's good in like mere mid-range soft control battles. You know, this between this and Luke, I'm not sure which one is actually like the best on rate 7 drop, but Darth Vader is in a bunch of tier 1 decks. Luke is not, so Darth Vader gets this spot. All right, number 4, the last of the chain of green villain staples. This is the best ramp card in the game, Super Laser Tech. It did drop a couple spaces in the rankings, but, you know, still incredible. It's the glue of these villain blue decks. It's kind of a glue for the Boba green deck, and it's going to continue to be a very important player in the long term. Ramp, we know, is very, very strong in this game, especially the ramp that lets you put become resources as opposed to something like Alliance Dispatcher, because ramping into leaders is such a huge tempo swing. And yeah, Super Laser Tech is premium. It looks like it will still remain premium after set 2, as I think it's still better than all the new ramp cards we've gotten. So you're going to see a lot of this card. All right, number 3, Cunning. Previous rank, it was an honorable mention. You know, this card's absolutely nuts. It's the best card in the mono yellow Boba. Well, it's the second best card in the mono yellow Boba deck. And it's, you know, it's kind of busted. It pushes so much damage. It flips boards. It can win races. Like Boba can win races against Sabine because of this card. It makes running 4 or less power 4+ drops really, really feel bad sometimes. Like, man, if you play like Obi-Wan in your deck and you're playing against mono yellow Boba, you just can't play that card. Even cards like Kanan and K2 feel so much weaker when they can get bounced, and you can lose so much tempo off of this card. It does see a little bit of play as a 6-cost card in like something like Boba Green. Some people opt to play it there. I think the card is significantly weaker when you're paying 6 for it rather than 4, because so much of the power in this card is that you can generate a lot of tempo, and it's harder to do that later in the game when this is costing 6. But this card is incredible. Boba Yellow is one of the best decks in the game right now, and this is a big part of why. All right, number 2, another double aspect card. It's Vigilance, previous rank. It did not have one. You know, maybe some people say Cunning is better than this, and at 4 cost, when you're paying 4 for either of these cards, it probably is, but Vigilance for 6 is just a staple in this format right now. Vigilance on its own is played in a very wide range of decks, whether they're soft control or hard control decks, or even like mid-rangey decks. I think Vigilance has just become such a core part of Blue's identity in this game. It's very powerful even at 6 cost, and I think its wide-reaching application is why I've ranked it ahead of Cunning, even though on like pure power and pure rate, Cunning might be stronger. Vigilance is much more widely usable. I don't know if this will stay as strong as it is right now. I think it's very meta dependent, but the fact that this is sometimes a nail in the coffin for a Sabine aggro deck, and while also being good into Boba Fett decks because it can cleanly kill a few of their really pesky units like 7th Fleet Defender, while also negating an entire attack from Fett's Fire Spray. I think that's why Vigilance is so useful at 6. And on top of that, it also is providing an alternate win con for control decks, helping speed out milling or decking an opponent out with its discard 6 cards mode. All in all, very useful, very flexible card. And yeah, it was unranked a few months ago, all the way up to number 2. All right, last, not a big surprise. This is, in my opinion, the best card in Star Wars Unlimited right now, and might still be the best card in Star Wars Unlimited after set 2. I think the fact that the text, if you control Boba Fett or Jango Fett, ready this unit, is on this card is a big reason why Boba Fett is the best leader in Star Wars Unlimited right now. And I think if this card just came in ready and didn't have that text, we may actually see a wider metagame, because I think this with Boba Fett, right? Like, which one is propping the other one up? I mean, Boba Fett is a very highly statted leader, the most stats per cost in the game. He's got a powerful ability. But Fire Spray is a different beast. I mean, this card is out of control. It pushes so much damage. And yeah, I think if this just didn't have, like, wasn't locked into Boba Fett, it might actually be cool to, like, be able to run this in some other decks, and then maybe Boba Fett's meta share would drop. But yeah, I think it's really tough to beat this card. There aren't very many clean answers to it. There will be some new ones in the next set that interact with this a little better. But for now, if it wasn't for this card, I don't think Boba Fett would be as prominent as he is. I don't think people would have to basically ask the question every time they make a deck, how do I beat Boba Fett? I think a lot of the reason that question exists is because of Fett's Fire Spray. And that question existing is kind of the reason I think Boba Fett is I don't think too broken that anything needs to change specifically, but it is, in my opinion, the best archetype to be playing. It's the cleanest. It has game into everything. And everything else that wants to compete has to first say, can I beat Boba Fett, in order to justify its own meta presence. So, you know, that's why I got Fett's Fire Spray #1. I think it's the best card in the Boba Fett deck, either the green version or the mono yellow version. And yeah, it's gonna be an important card in the future as well. All right, that's all I got. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like the video. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel. And until next time, take care.